What would you do if your car suddenly caught fire with your family inside? Imagine the sound of a muffled siren, quick cuts showing thick smoke engulfing the air, flames licking the metal, and amidst all that chaos, a dog running without a second thought. That's the scene we're about to uncover. Flames, smoke, and a leap of faith that became neighborhood legend. The phrase sounds like a movie trailer, but it really happened, and what you'll discover now may surprise you. Stay with me until the end, because this story isn't just about a burning car. It's about instinct, courage, and the indescribable bond between an animal and its family. Have you ever been there? Maybe not, but we all know the fear of losing what we love, and it's this connection that makes hero dog stories so powerful and moving. In the opening shots, the dog's face reflects the flames. His eyes glow, as if carrying a decision to enter or flee, and in that impossible second, he chooses to fight. The narrative that follows is not just a rescue story. It's an invitation to understand how a single gesture can change lives, how a dog who saved his family became the talk of every house on the street and earned the eternal gratitude of those who narrowly escaped. We'll describe it minute by minute, without losing the cinematic rhythm, the smell of fuel, the heat that tightens your chest, the clock that accelerates your heart, the trembling hand trying to open the door, and then the dog's movement, quick, determined, almost human in its persistence. As you listen to the stories, you'll realize that heroic acts aren't always born of formal training. Sometimes they spring from something older, deeper, instinct, bond, an urgency that refuses to wait. And as I tell you, pay attention to the details few people notice in the news reports, the position of the flames, the way the smoke shifted, the small signs that there was still enough time to act. These make the difference between a tragedy and a miracle. Amidst the desperation, practical questions also arise that most ignore until they need them. Do you have an emergency plan for pets? Do you know how to react if the heat is too intense? Questions like these will naturally arise as we follow the scene, because emotion without information doesn't transform behavior. The family that nearly lost everything now doesn't just talk about the shock. They talk about the moment the dog, without understanding human terms, used everything he had to save the one he loved most. Neighbors who previously merely greeted the scene now watch with reverence. Social media has turned the act into a local legend, and the dog's name is now synonymous with courage. But before we delve into the consequences and the practical lessons you can apply in your own home, I want you to imagine for a second what goes through the mind of an animal faced with fire. Fear, determination, love? This question is the thread that holds our story together, and it's what we'll explore in the next section, detailing the heroic act minute by minute and revealing why this hero dog became a symbol of hope in that neighborhood. And as the story continues to unfold, I want to ask you something important, like someone talking to a neighbor after a scare. If this scene touched you in any way, if this act of courage spoke louder, leave a comment below to tell us what touched you most, or share a similar story you've experienced or witnessed. If this topic resonates with you, leave a comment below to tell us what touched you most. Reading these experiences isn't vanity, it's a collective lesson, and each story helps others understand how to act in an emergency and appreciate these four-legged heroes. And if you feel this story deserves to be seen by more people, by neighbors who haven't yet experienced this kind of courage, by pet owners who need to prepare, or simply by those who enjoy seeing good things happen, please like the video. It's a small gesture for you, but it greatly expands the reach of this message. Your participation here is what makes this channel grow and reach more people with this type of content. And it's with your participation that we can transform isolated stories into useful alerts for entire families. Subscribing to the channel is also part of this care. By subscribing, you ensure you won't miss the next stages of this story, nor the next cases of dogs saving lives, and between videos, we learn together how to protect those we love. Feel free to comment, like, and subscribe, more than just numbers. This means we're building a community that honors courage, shares practical care, and helps spread lessons that may one day save another family. Now, returning to the decisive moment of that burning car, let's dive into the account minute by minute and see exactly what happened when the dog made the decision that changed everything. That night began like so many others in the neighborhood. Narrow streets, yellow streetlights casting long shadows over parked cars, half-open doors that let out the sound of someone's TV, and the feeling that nothing truly extraordinary could possibly happen there. But around 9:30 p.m., the routine was shattered by an acrid smell no one expected, a smell of gasoline mixed with burning plastic. And within seconds, what had been an ordinary car on the sidewalk became a blaze of flames devouring the metal. The family in that car was simple, with faces familiar to the neighborhood. Anna, 34, a loving mother with a hand always ready for her children's candy. Jerome, 37, a hard-working father who was returning late from his shift. And their two children, Luan, 6, and little Sophia, 3, still with the smell of dinner clinging to their clothes. The family's puppy, Max, a medium-sized, bright-eyed mutt who grew up on the same street as the children, was in the back seat as always, a natural part of that daily journey, part of that small tribe. When the fire started, everything became urgent. Nearby houses with windows facing the street were quickly at risk, and the possibility of an explosion, due to the full tank and intense heat, made every second a life-or-death decision. It was at this point that the story ceased to be just another story and took on a human face, because there was not only the visible danger of the flames at the scene, but also the palpable fear of parents who see the fragility of the world in their children's eyes. Anna, with a trembling voice and her hand over her mouth, spoke in a short sentence that cut through even those passing by. "He saved my son." And this simple and direct statement is the trigger that connects us. Those watching immediately understand the emotional dimension of what is happening. The heat made the windows rattle. Smoke filled nostrils and stung eyes. Flames cast orange reflections on people's skin. And at the center of this whirlwind was the instinctive choice of an animal that knew every step of that family. The prevailing mentality in that moment wasn't one of formal training or learned tricks. It was an immediate response, a decision born of bonding and shared routine. Max didn't hesitate. He got into the car, grabbed the seatbelt with his mouth, pulled, dragged, and did what many training sessions fail to teach in seconds of chaos, acting with the sole purpose of protecting. Around him, neighbors approached with blankets, others called the fire department, and some wept in a discomfort that seemed collective. In that set of reactions, an ordinary street corner was transformed into the stage for a story that would change the way that community viewed its pets. It wasn't just physical salvation. The emotional impact reverberated as if a hidden truth had been revealed, that courage can dwell in the simplest gestures and that decisions are born of bonds, not just instructions. While the smoke still spread, the children were pulled out by human and canine hands, and the father's face, sweaty and soot-stained, showed a relief mixed with disbelief. It was at that moment that the narrative took on a life of its own, becoming backyard chatter, neighborhood headlines, and even a topic shared among strangers who began to understand the behind-the-scenes story of animal heroism. The smell, the heat, the metallic sound of doors being forced open, all of it was etched in memories like a soundtrack accompanying the journey of those who survived. And it's important to understand that behind the impressive clip you can see in the images, there were human decisions that nearly prevented the miracle. The choice to park in a safe place, the way to handle the smoking engine before the fire, small preventative actions that, if they had been different, would have reduced the risk or, on the contrary, increased the drama. Now I want to delve even deeper into this subject, because when the dust settles, when emergency measures are taken, and when the heat no longer burns through clothing, what remains is a series of revelations about how small actions shape destinies. There's a truth often left out of news reports. Preparation and daily attention are as crucial as the heroic act itself. The transformation the family experienced wasn't just physical. Losing or recovering something material is different from revering a life saved. It was a shift in perspective, a journey that altered the way neighbors relate to their animals and exposed the inner workings of the choices we make automatically. Split-second decisions, like prioritizing the removal of children, remaining calm when opening the car door, or trusting an animal's instincts, reveal the impact that collective consciousness can have in the face of danger. And when you think about what could have happened, the frightening possibilities that were avoided, you realize that the episode is a practical lesson in courage and prevention at the same time. It teaches about first aid, emergency kits, and how to properly train a pet to react. But above all, it forces us to reflect on how we live our daily lives. This event, told by those who witnessed it, becomes a lesson because it humanizes the risk and focuses on priorities, protecting others, educating the community, valuing the emotional bonds we often neglect. That's why stories like this resonate so deeply. We're not just witnessing an isolated incident. We're entering the heart of a transformation that affects attitudes, decisions, and the very narrative of the neighborhood. Comment below. That makes sense to me. The engine let out a dry, almost imperceptible click, and then a wisp of smoke emerged from under the hood like a belated warning. It was brief, a short circuit, experts later said, but in that instant it felt like time slowed down. A pop, a sharp smell of burning rubber, a spark that met gasoline and turned to flame. The ambient sounds changed. Televisions, street conversations, distant music, everything became muffled, replaced by the growing crackle of the fire. The initial reaction was one of suppressed panic. Enna tried to open the door with her fingernails. Joan tugged at his seatbelt. The children cried, small sounds mingling with the hum of the flames. The clock on the neighbor's living room wall stopped making sense. In a fraction of a second, the domestic scene became a risk zone. There was a piercing silence like before the storm, and there, in that interval, Max entered the scene. It wasn't a theatrical entrance. It was the decision of a being who knew every breath that family took. He'd been in that car 1,000 times, seen the children sleeping, received affection on short trips. It was part of the routine. When the smoke began to invade the space, Max moved like a wave. First his nose, then his paws, then a determination that cut through human panic and found a clear purpose. He barked, a sharp, repetitive sound, unlike a common warning. It was an urgent, insistent call that made the neighbors turn. The barking that appears in the videos isn't just sound, it's code. And in that code was the decision to act. What happened next will surprise you. Max grabbed the seatbelt with his mouth. He pulled, he yanked. The way he held on, firmly and without letting go, seemed to teach the viewer something about courage. It's not the absence of fear, it's acting despite it. Joan, desperate, finally managed to free the window, and it was in that moment of opportunity that Max sprang into action again, this time pushing, helping to open it, as if he knew how to use his body to amplify human strength. In images that later circulated, the animal is seen dragging little Sophia out of the back seat, carrying her to the lap of someone who held out their hands. Every movement had rhythm, almost mechanical precision. But beneath the lines was emotion, the same emotion that makes a family stay together after a scare. The natural sound effects of the place, the crackling, the leaking gas, the heavy breathing, created dramatic pauses that seem rehearsed when edited for a video. Short, breathy phrases, pull, don't let go, get her out of here, and the space between one order and the next, filled by the sound of paws on the leather of the seat, the friction of hot metal. At times, the scenes seemed to flow like a perfectly paced film. Quick cuts, close-ups of the dog's eyes, the muffled sound of a siren in the distance, a scream that dissolves into a sigh of relief. The minute-by-minute construction of this story is precisely where the revelations lie, small details that change our perception of courage and the role of animals in critical moments, authority and verification help transform emotion into understanding. Firefighters who arrived minutes later confirmed that the fire had originated from a short circuit and that, indeed, quick action would have prevented an explosion. The veterinarian who treated Max also noted that despite some scratches and minor burns, the behavior wasn't just the result of training. It was instinctive, reinforced by bonding. This professional confirmation supports the narrative. We're not just romanticizing an act. We're describing a real phenomenon with proven impact. Knowing that experts validated the event changes the viewer's mindset. It goes from "it was luck" to "it was a combination of human and animal factors that converged into a miracle." Meanwhile, the micro-decisions made in that moment proved crucial. Joan decided not to drive. Anna picked up the blanket from the trunk. A neighbor held the back door shut to prevent more smoke from entering. Each action, no matter how small, altered the course of history. This is a practical lesson hidden in the heat of the drama. Simple, quick decisions have a profound impact in risky situations. It is the fusion of canine instinct and human choices that creates the difference between tragedy and salvation. And in the emotional journey that unfolds around these acts, there is a transformation not only physical but also of attitude. Neighbors who previously ignored animals now see them as beings capable of decisive action. Families who neglected emergency plans begin to seriously rethink their routines. The behind-the-scenes story of this rescue reveals not only training but also the limits of instinct. Max, for example, didn't execute a pre-programmed command. He responded to the bond and daily training of coexistence, which shaped his confidence to act. It's a hidden truth that rarely makes the headlines. A trained animal doesn't always mean design. It often means coexistence, the repetition of small interactions that in moments of crisis become repertoire. And when we analyze the act minute by minute, we realize that courage has texture. It's not just a grand gesture, but a series of small, synchronized actions that create an extraordinary result. Amidst the tumult, images of solidarity emerge that warm the narrative. Welcoming hands, blankets that wrap, neighbors offering water and words of comfort. The emotional impact spreads, transforming the story into something greater than a simple local occurrence. It becomes a lesson for other neighborhoods. And when the professionals provided care, in addition to providing bandages, they offered practical recommendations that are now circulated among residents, such as keeping a first response kit for pets, how to check for smoke signals early, and how to teach rescue commands without losing affection. These recommendations are part of the practical legacy left by this heroic act. Now I want to delve even deeper into this subject. And by looking in detail at every second of that scene, we realize that there are overlapping layers: emotion, technique, routine, decision, and above all, connection. The minute-by-minute narrative is not just a record of what happened. It's a map to understand how small, everyday actions can become bridges to saving lives. The journey of that family and their dog reveals that the unexpected can be faced with emotional and practical preparation. That the hidden truth behind heroic gestures is often simple: love repeated in small actions. Comment, "This makes sense to me," when the flames finally subsided and the heat, which had once seemed like a living wall, gave way to lighter smoke and the lingering smell of burning. There was a collective moment of disbelief, followed by a sigh of relief that rippled through the entire street. The rescue was complete, but the impact of that moment still pulsated in the bodies and voices. The children were out of the car, wrapped in blankets, their eyes wide and their breathing slowly calming. Anna trembled against her husband's chest, and Joan couldn't speak, only holding his children's hands as if he wanted to keep them there forever. At the center of that scene was Max, exhausted, covered in soot, with small cuts and a few superficial burns, nothing that dimmed the familiar sparkle in his eyes. but enough for the vet to say, in a voice that blended technique and emotion, that this dog had given everything. Medical care was swift and humane. Paramedics attended to the children and parents, checked vital signs, administered oxygen when necessary, and then took Max for a field veterinary evaluation. Later, the dog was taken to an animal hospital where he received bandages, painkillers, and lots of attention. Seeing Max being treated like family, with gentle hands adjusting his bandages and soothing voices calling his name, epitomized the transformation that episode brought about in the neighborhood's mentality, from simple coexistence to collective care. The social impact was immediate and spread rapidly. Word spread from door to door, and soon the story was in grocery store conversations, church gatherings, and messages in neighboring neighborhoods. What for some might have been just a police report turned into a story that brought to light a hidden truth. The presence of an animal in the family dynamic isn't just affection, it's also a potential for action in risky situations. Local animal protection organizations and even a regional federation offered support, both for Max's treatment and for guidance for the family on how to deal with post-event trauma. Spontaneous tributes poured in. Flowers on the sidewalk, notes in the garage, and a neighbor who, moved, left a new toy for the children in the hero dog's name. This collective reaction valued not only the act itself, but also the lesson. Recognition is the consequence of real impact. On a personal level, the repercussions were equally profound. Beyond the immediate relief, the family faced a journey of emotional recovery. The following nights brought interrupted dreams, sporadic relives of the heat and noise, and a new sensitivity to any sign of smoke. But along with the fear came a different force, a conscious decision to transform the trauma into learning. Enna began participating in community support groups. Jerome became involved in fire prevention campaigns in the neighborhood. The children, after a period of emotional care, introduced a simple nightly ritual, checking the doors and squeezing Max's hand before bed, which became, for them, part of a new routine of safety and affection. This journey was not linear, but it was real, and the transformation that took place in the family was both practical and symbolic. The social lessons from this episode spread like tiny seeds. Neighbors began checking electrical connections. Local educators organized short talks on first aid and vehicle safety. And a volunteer group began developing a simple emergency guide for families with pets, compiling precautionary tips ranging from how to park safely to maintaining a basic first aid kit for animals and people. These seemingly simple measures represent decisions that alter everyday risk and demonstrate the power of collective learning. The revelations that emerged from behind the scenes, that a poorly insulated cable can trigger a tragedy or that a home evacuation plan can save lives, became practical conversations, no longer just heartwarming stories to be shared at the gate. At the same time, the impact brought formal recognition. A local animal protection association organized a small ceremony of thanks, with a symbolic certificate for Max and mention of the animal's courage. It wasn't about medals. It was about giving a name and meaning to the impact a gesture had on the community. This recognition helped rebuild collective self-esteem. Neighbors who had previously remained indifferent began to see the value in mutual care. Young people in the neighborhood, inspired by the dog's courage, proposed a prevention campaign for more vulnerable homes. And the city received requests to install signage and fire hydrant points in areas that had previously been neglected. The story of a burning car ultimately triggered a series of public and private decisions aimed at reducing the likelihood of a repeat, a practical effect that illustrates the impact that can be achieved when an individual action resonates throughout the community. On an emotional level, Max's recovery and the family's gratitude created scenes of affection that became iconic for those who followed the case. Images of the dog snuggled in children's laps, hands stroking his fur, messages written by people moved by the story, all contributed to solidifying the narrative of hope that emerged from the ashes. Furthermore, the technical analysis performed by firefighters and veterinarians shed light on important details: the exact origin of the fire, the correct measures to take when smoke is detected, and the role of coexistence training in pet behavior. These explanations helped dispel myths and reinforce safe practices, transforming sentiment into actionable knowledge. There's also a human side that speaks to responsibility and empathy. The family, though relieved, recognized that part of the story could serve to educate others. Therefore, they decided to share testimonies and collaborate with prevention groups. This attitude reinforced the idea that each story has transformative potential. It's an individual's journey translated into collective learning. And when neighbors reported small changes in their routine after the incident, checking the electrical wiring, keeping blankets accessible in the trunk, practicing basic commands with animals, it became clear that the episode served as a catalyst for a new community attitude. Now, I want to delve even deeper into this topic, because understanding the immediate consequences is only one layer. Behind the bandages and ceremonies lie lasting questions about preparedness, mindset, and how decisions made in the heat of the moment translate into lasting policies and habits. Let's explore these layers, look behind the scenes at the prevention efforts that have emerged, and understand how small revelations can generate grand transformations in a neighborhood's culture. Comment, "This resonates with me." Now I want to delve even deeper into this topic, because emotion without practice becomes just a pretty story to tell, and real transformation happens when we combine feeling with action. After the scare, the family understood that courage was the beginning, but conscious decisions and preparation are what sustain the change in mindset that needs to spread throughout the community. That's why it's important to describe, clearly and lovingly, what anyone can start doing today to increase the safety of their home, car, and pet. Not as a list, but as habits that become part of their routine and that, little by little, rewrite the risk journey into a prevention journey. Think first about training and coexistence. Basic commands like come, drop it, and stay seem simple. But when practiced consistently, they become powerful tools. Training a dog to come when called or to drop something from its mouth may seem trivial until the day this command saves a life. Frequent practice, always in a loving context with treats, affection, and short repetitions, creates a repertoire that the animal can access even in times of stress. Furthermore, the routine of coexistence, which includes accustoming the animal to getting in and out of the car calmly, remaining calm in different sounds, and responding to stimuli, builds behavioral security that, in a crisis, reduces the chance of panic and increases the likelihood of helpful actions. That's right, transformation comes from affectionate repetition. Find a trainer or local veterinarian to guide you through safe exercises appropriate to your pet's temperament, because each animal is a unique journey. Next, consider practical preventive measures. Periodically check the electrical system of your car and home. Minor warning signs, such as a burning smell or smoke coming from the dashboard, should be addressed immediately, not delayed. In the car, keeping the fuel tank in safe condition, avoiding the accumulation of flammable objects in the trunk, and parking in well-ventilated areas can reduce the risk. At home, an accessible emergency kit makes a difference. A thermal blanket, water, sturdy gloves, a flashlight with a fresh battery, a compatible fire extinguisher, and a small pet first aid kit with gauze, vet-recommended antiseptic, and compressors make emergency response faster and more effective. No hospital equipment is needed. It's the basics, well organized and within reach of those who need to act in the first few minutes. At the same time, creating a family emergency plan, incorporating pets, changes the collective mindset. Agreeing with your family who will pick up the children, who will pick up the animal, and where everyone will meet outside the house turns panic into a simple script. Testing this plan in quick simulations, opening the door, calmly exiting, gathering blankets, And finding a meeting point creates procedural memory that works better than any instruction in the midst of desperation. Teaching children not to run, to protect their breathing with a damp cloth, and to wait for adult guidance reduces the risk of falls and inhalation. And gradually training pets to accept being carried or guided with a leash or carrier can speed up evacuation. There's also the first aid aspect. Knowing basic measures saves time and reduces damage. For humans, removing the person from a safe location, calming them, checking their breathing, and in case of burns, cooling them with running water, never direct ice, for a few minutes before covering them with a clean cloth is a simple procedure that everyone should know. For animals, avoiding sudden movements, lightly covering their airways if they are in shock, and seeking immediate veterinary care are essential steps. One point of attention: never use human medications on your pet without professional guidance. Having the contact details for your veterinary emergency room and a local emergency service on paper or a note on your phone is a practical decision that reduces response time. Beyond individual practice, there's a collective impact when neighbors exchange information and organize preventive actions. Sharing insights into electrical maintenance, scheduling inspections for homes at higher risk, or even creating a WhatsApp group for rapid alerts are decisions that increase everyone's safety. The hidden truth this episode revealed is that many small failures add up to a critical situation. On the other hand, small improvements made daily greatly reduce risk. A neighborhood's transformation depends on this mutual attention. A neighbor who learns to check for loose wires can prevent the entire street from having to deal with a fire. On an emotional level, building resilience is also part of the response. Moments of crisis leave their mark, and caring for the mental health of children and adults, seeking professional support when necessary, facilitates the resumption of routine. Telling the story, processing it as a family, and transforming trauma into learning are decisions that strengthen community bonds and shift mindsets toward a preventive, not just a reactive, stance. Behind the scenes, those involved in prevention initiatives realize that teaching and learning with generosity generates an impact that goes beyond the streets themselves. Finally, it's important to emphasize that knowledge and action go hand in hand. Check your car, talk to your veterinarian, practice commands with affection, prepare a simple kit and define a family plan. These actions don't eliminate the risk, but they drastically reduce the likelihood of a tragedy and increase the chance of an outcome similar to the one we experienced, where a courageous gesture combines with sensible decisions to save lives. The prevention journey is continuous. Each daily choice builds a new standard of safety. Write it down. I'm on this journey too. If you've made it this far, thank you for walking with me through this story. It means you value what matters: courage, care, and preparation. If this content brought something useful to your routine or resonated with you, subscribe to the channel so you don't miss any more videos that blend emotion with real-world practices that can make a difference in your daily life. And if this story touched your heart, leave a like. It's a simple and sincere way to show that this conversation resonated with you and helps keep this kind of content happening here. I want to know who was with me until the end. Write the phrase, "I'm with you until the end," in the comments. That way I can see who's with me on this journey of care and learning. There's a video here that complements this topic. Click and follow me there so we can continue understanding how to transform courage into practical action. Thanks for watching. We're in this together.